Well, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us, New York. My name is Jeremiah Best. I'm with New York Agriculture in the Classroom. We have our awesome executive director, Ms. Katie Carpenter, on site at Tug Hill Vineyard in Lewis County. So as y'all are joining us, we hope you're enjoying the national conference. At the end of the virtual field trip, we are going to be offering a giveaway to 10 of our participants today. So I just put a link into the chat. If throughout the virtual field trip, if you could just enter your name, first and last name in there, we'll be putting you into one of our programs to choose those 10 lucky panelists. As you're filling out the Google form, that will be open throughout the experience. So just take your time. Too many people jumping in at once will definitely overload it. So excuse me. So we are in Lewis County, and we'll take a quick look for our friends that are joining us from around the nation. If you can see the star here in the middle of New York State, we're at Tug Hill Vineyards, which is Lewis County. If you see the blue, that's the Adirondack State Park. And just underneath the star is Tug Hill. So Tug Hill Vineyards is definitely in a very cold climate, pushing zone 3, just on the edge of zone 4. And it's circled by the Tug Hill Plateau as well as the Adirondacks. And these are some of the places that get the most snow. So you can see here, it's on the edge of these two regions as well as the St. Lawrence Seaway. So I'd like to introduce our hosts, the Bellairs. So how are you today?
Hey, we're doing good.
So we have John and Taryn, and could you tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us a little bit about your farm?
All right, thank you. So my wife and I just purchased this vineyard in January. We had come here a lot for the event side of things. This was kind of our hangout go-to spot with friends when they were visiting, or friends in the area. So we actually helped out last summer, all summer long, with the grapes in the grounds and stuff like that. And some of the events, they had limited events with COVID, obviously. So we helped out and got our feet wet and kind of decided for sure if we wanted to buy it or not. A little bit of background on us. So I have the mic. If anyone has questions for my wife, she loves talking. I will hand it right over to her. But we have 3 young boys, well, young in our eyes, 9, 11, and 15. And my family has a dairy farm here in Lewis County. We've had a dairy farm for about 100 years now, so that keeps us very busy. My wife Taryn is a special ed teacher in the local school district. So along with that, we have both kept our full-time jobs. Long term, we'll see for sure, but as of right now, it's still working. Part of the deal, I guess I should say, or part of the advantage with working here last summer was the staff got to know us and they all come on with us when we purchased the place. So there are a lot of capable people here that know a lot about this place and help it keep running smoothly. And then we are here as much as we can. Obviously, summers are a little bit easier once school gets out, but that's yeah. So I guess for us, the biggest draw was that this is a very unique place. This only winery in this general area, and there's not even a lot of wineries around here. Along with the winery, we have UPick blueberries, UPick raspberries, some apples, and some UPick grapes, along with a few plum trees. And about half the income from this place comes from events, actually. So we host a lot of weddings here. We have music events once a week with, we call it wine down, food and music. And then we have Sunday brunches here as well. So we have a lot of different things that we do, but overall, we enjoy everything.
Can you tell us a little bit about your location there in Lewis County? What's the weather like, the climate, the population, economics?
Yep. So the weather is beautiful during the summer and very cold during the winter. So like Jeremiah said, we are in the snow bands. We get a lot of lake effect snow. And actually 4 or 5 years ago, the village of Copenhagen right next door had the most snowfall in the United States, which I don't know if I want to be proud of that or not, but it's a fact. So so winters we get weather temperatures as low as 40 degrees below zero. In summers we get days like today is 90 here. So we have a big fluctuation in the weather. Otherwise the climate is generally, generally mild. You'll take away the two extremes. The county is 100% ag county without a doubt. Dairy farming makes up a huge amount of the county. Last I knew, there were more cows than people still in Lewis County, around 30,000. Is that correct, Katie? Yep, around 30,000 cows, which I believe the population is around 27,000 people. Lavos, the main seat, which is about 5 miles away. That's the only major town, village in Lavaux or in the county. So very, very rural. During the summer, my guess is half our customer base comes from tourists visiting their camps in the Adirondacks. And then, obviously during the winter, it's mostly locals. We do get a fair amount of snowmobilers at certain times of the year.
So as part of your farm, you have a vineyard, but you also have a UPick operation. Can you show that to us?
Correct. Yeah, we can head that way right now. So we have about 5 acres of high bush blueberries, and they are about 3 weeks away right now. About 3 acres of raspberries. They are actually pretty much ready right now. We just don't tell the general public until they get really close, because otherwise we get bought out within a couple of days. So within a week here, we'll be able to offer UPick raspberries. Then we have around 20 to 30 apple trees, and then we have 4 to 5 varieties of UPick grapes that we can offer in the fall as well. But for sure, the blueberries are the biggest thing. The blueberries are right here beside us right now. They're all on irrigation. They're all high bush blueberries. There's about 3 different varieties in there. And as you can see, they are completely loaded this year. It looks like it's going to be a phenomenal year. We've had a lot of heat, and then we've had a very early spring. So we're really excited about the potential for the blueberries. And then as she zooms up, the apple trees are right behind here. That's some of them. We have 2 or 3 different sections of apple trees around the area. And then actually right behind those apple trees are the UPick table grapes. They have never done really great in this climate. So all of our wine grapes are from University of Minnesota. They're all cold hardy wine grapes. So there's about 6 different varieties here. The table grapes, it's kind of more of an experiment to see if they will work or not. And they don't survive the cold weather quite as good as the wine grapes do.
So as you have started this UPick operation, is there any additional management that you need to do?
So we're relatively new to all this. We were here obviously last summer, getting our feet wet and trying to figure everything out. Overall, the UPick, I mean, it takes a fair amount of labor to, they got to be mulched in the spring, fertilized, sprayed and stuff like that. And, when you're selling it, as much as you would think that they're really profitable, I would say they're a break-even scenario at most, but the reason we really like them is they get a lot of people here during the summer. So we offer lunches during the day, and then obviously wine tastings all the time. So once people come to UPick, they seem to like to hang out and eat lunch and grab some wine and stuff like that. So the UPick does add a fair amount of profit overall, but just having a UPick farm, I'm not sure how great that would do around here as far as because the labor costs are so high to, you got to man the UPick stand, and then fair amount of labor pruning the berries and keeping weeded and all that stuff.
And do any of your berries go into any of the products that you make?
Yep. So we make a blueberry wine, which we use some of our berries for that. And then we actually don't use the raspberries. The raspberries have always sold out in a hurry. We had a raspberry wine in the past, and it wasn't worth the labor for it. We do use a lot of the berries in our food. During the summer, we always try to use fresh raspberries, blueberries, whatever's in season, apples in the fall. And that's a big draw to people for sure.
We do have a great question from Jen Briggs, and she wants to know how table grapes are different than wine grapes.
Our winemaker's right here, so I'm going to ask him, and he's going to answer how are table grapes different from wine grapes, and the fact that why don't they do as good here?
So as far as table grapes to wine grapes, the wine grapes are bred according to make specific variables and that are desirable for wine, whereas the table grapes don't have the same flavors you'd want to pull out of there. A lot of I don't know.
The cold hardiness.
Yeah, well, the table grapes aren't crossbred with the same same, the Vitis riparia is the wild grape that grows native around here. So they're like typically a breed between like Pinot Noir and that riparia grape that's the native grape, where a lot of the table grapes aren't. The riparia is, clearly it grows here, so it's handles the weather a lot better.
And then we have
Yeah,
M.
Go ahead.
Gendler asked what species breeds of fruit that you have. You discussed grapes, raspberries, blueberries. Do you have anything else?
I didn't get the first part of the question, but yeah. So we have apples, we have plums. They tried growing cherries. They couldn't handle the cold. Their trunks would split out during the winter when we got the really cold weather. As our pears, they're right here. They do okay, but they're really susceptible to disease, and they get that trunk split as well when we get the cold weather. We had a few currant bushes here. No one really liked them, so we did get rid of them. But yeah, that's all we have for fruits.
Well, excellent. So if you have any questions, any of the teachers, if you want to put your questions in the Q&A box, we'd be more than happy to answer those questions. Throughout the summer, about how many tourists do you think you bring to the area?
Boy, I really do not know. There's a lot of different people. Do you have any idea, Taryn?
Well, I don't have an exact answer, but I just looked as we were walking over, and we have license plates from about 5 different states in the parking lot right now.
Yep. I mean, I think you could easily say we would have 100 to 120 people a week from out of the area, if not more. I mean, today there's 15 to 20 alone here right now from out of the area. So it could be a lot. I guess I really don't know how many it is. So do you want to walk over to the raspberries quick?
Sarah Beth wants to know, as we're headed to the raspberries, how many bundles of grapes come from each vine? How many bundles are needed to make a bottle of wine?
So take 3 clumps of grapes to make a bottle of wine, approximately, big clumps, roughly. I mean, yep, sometimes more depending on the size of the clump. And it varies a lot on how many bottles you figure per plant. I guess that's the easiest way to, because it varies a lot on how you prune. I mean, obviously, if you don't prune right and you can have a lot of small clusters, but a good sized cluster would be 3 of them per bottle of wine, and you would get 10 or 12 per grapevine pretty easy. Am I correct, Derek? Yeah. So you could have 3 to 4 bottles of wine per grapevine pretty easy. I mean, it obviously varies a lot on the year and stuff like that. So, and the growing degree days we get make a huge difference around here when it comes to grapes.
Sarah also wants to know what specialty wines you make.
Especially wines we make. So we have our regulars that we grow here. So we have Marquette and we have the Prairie Star grapes and La Crescent and stuff like that. For specialty wines, we do a late harvest ice wine, very sweet, obviously very high sugar content. In the past, we did do an apple wine. We've done a raspberry wine before. We do a blueberry wine, and we still do a strawberry rhubarb wine, which is very popular. Obviously, that's purchase rhubarb juice because I'm not growing that much rhubarb, but that's been a very popular wine. So.
And we do have people joining us from the South. Could you tell us what an ice wine is?
So an ice wine is in the fall of the year, you leave a certain amount of grapes on the vines, and you come out some morning when it's below freezing and you pick them and you press them while they're frozen. And then as you're pressing them, a lot of the water is in the crystal in the grape, so it stays in there. So you just get I would call it the thick juice out of the grapes. So it makes it a very high sugar content.
And we were briefly talking about the different harvests that you have. Are there different things that you need to do throughout the year to maintain your grape crop and berry crops?
Yep. So the grape crops are by far the most labor intensive. In the spring of the year, you have to go through and prune everything, which is essentially cutting off any dead growth and then trying to find the most healthy cane there, which then that essentially makes the base for the next year. You keep the same trunk and then put a healthy cane along the corridor. And then during the summer, right now is actually pretty quiet, but as the summer progresses, you go through and de-leaf so the berries can get more sunlight, and you do some combing on the vines, which is basically separating out all the branches so air can get through and sun can get through and stuff like that. So we do not have any mechanical anything when it comes to the grapes, so everything is done by hand here. Some vineyards have mechanical de-leafers, they'll have mechanical harvesters and stuff like that. So we have about 20 acres of grapes, and everything's done by hand, so it takes a fair amount of labor. So.
And we have a great question from Carrie Turk, and she wants to know what are the times that you pick your grapes?
So the grapes are picked in the fall. Obviously, it all depends on the weather, how nice of a year we've had when they're ready. But September and October is the main harvest season, and we rely on a lot of local volunteers. We advertise, well, I don't want to say we advertise, we put it out there that we're looking for people to help, and in exchange we feed them lunch, and we also invite them to a harvest dinner at the end of the year. So we rely a lot on volunteers during the harvest season for sure.
So these are awesome questions, and you talked about some of the hospitality. Could you take us to the tasting room? As we go, we'll ask you a few more of these great questions coming in, and talk a little bit about the other side of things. I did have a great question from my vet, and I think we might have created a new marketing or source for you. She wants to know if you offer how to make wine at home classes.
We do not offer that. That's a great idea, actually. Our winemaker is very, very knowledgeable, and that's something he could definitely do.
So I bet we'll definitely have to get you a percentage.
Can't make too much at home. You got to keep buying it from us though too. So.
Michelle Barber wants to know, what is the typical sugar content of your different species of wine grapes?
So I am actually, since we're heading to the tasting room anyways, I can throw out some numbers, but our winemaker is right here and he does this for a living. So I'm going to hand the headset over to him, and I will tell him the question and then he can answer it.
Yeah. So as far as sugar content in different varieties, I try to harvest under different parameters per grape. Like a white wine, I don't like to go over 20 to 22 bricks because it's a more delicate wine. You don't want to overdo it with the alcohol, otherwise it's a little in your face. Whereas like a red wine like Marquette or Frontenac that we grow, I'm trying to get as many as possible, honestly. So I'll go for 24 or 25 bricks is usually pretty good, about as good as we can get as far as a sugar content.
So some of our teachers who do syrup might know the term bricks. Can you briefly discuss with us what bricks is?
Yeah, it's just essentially it's a measure of soluble solids within the juice, in this case that being sugar. A lot of like home winemakers use this term specific gravity. It's just another measurement you can get the sugar concentration with. It's metric. Almost everything I do is, metric conversions. But yeah, it's just a scale they use to measure. As far as like what percentage of the grape, I don't know. Yeah.
And that's definitely something that, as we're working with teachers, that brick scale is used in hay as well as maple syrup, cane sugars. So that's used across the agricultural fields. Stephanie Hospital-Horn wants to know, do you make the wine there on the winery or off-site? And I think we're headed to the answer.
We do it right here on site. I believe we're going up to the winery before too long, and I can show you the process.
And what is your most popular wine, Maya wants to know?
Well, usually the sweeter ones are the better sellers. So I'd say Taillight Red probably, or Winter White, which are our sweetest, red and white.
Since most of the people on are teachers, do you think there's a special teacher wine that they like to partake in? And we are looking at the shop. I don't know, we lost volume. But this is their retail sector, very beautiful. And do we have y'all back? So we might have lost signal. We are glad that y'all have joined us. And congratulations to all of you for such a unique year. You well-earned summer. So do we have you now? So we still don't have them. And as you can see, the previous owners were landscapers and definitely took a lot of care and taking care of the
Jeremiah,
ground.
can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Awesome. Sorry, just give us just a minute and we'll get.
So much of the land has been landscaped and meticulously taken care of through the year. Before we started with you all today, we were talking with John, and he mentioned that they had used almost a tractor trailer full of mulch. So one of the things that they're also looking at adding here in the next year, in this area, there's a big push for green renewable energies. So they're looking at adding some windmills in distance, quite a few in this region, as well as solar farms going up. So do we have you all back?
I believe so, yes.
We have you.
Excellent.
So we have a question from my vet. She wants to know, are there any animals on the vineyard?
Yeah, we have a dog out there right now. It's a fairly new one. It's I forget her name. It's Bailey. Yeah. We actually walked by her. There's a house out there you might have saw in the shot we walked by. She was hiding out in there when we walked by. But she seems like a pretty good girl.
And a big part of your farm is agritourism. And can you just talk a little bit about the role that hospitality plays in your enterprise?
Well, grapes, like in general, seem to be a pretty seasonal. The wine industry is pretty seasonal, just across the world, almost, just pretty much. And it's like when you travel, it's that's one of the things people partake in is food and trying the different things from different cultures, and wine just happens to be one of those things that carries a lot of different cultural things you can almost pull out and identify. So it just kind of goes hand in hand with the business.
And do you have a strong connection with local producers in your area of different products?
We do purchase some grapes from some local producers, some small, just grape growers. I believe we carry some craft beverages also. It's not exactly my area. Oh, we have coffee, honey, things like that, all local.
And is it only the winery in UPick, or do you all do other things?
Yeah.
I stole it from Derek for just a minute, then I'll give it back when we get up here. So yeah, winery and UPick make up about half the business. The other half of the business comes from weddings, brunches, parties, events like that. So the hospitality side is a big part of this business for sure. And that's, I don't think it's any secret to anyone, is what interests my wife and I the most. As then Derek and Nick and some of the other guys around here run with the wine side of it.
And Timothy wants to know, and we had a great panorama of Lewis County there. He notices that there are quite a few vineyards that are near large bodies of water. And when we looked at the first map, we kind of saw some large bodies of water. Is there any water body near you?
There is not. We are on a north facing hill that obviously allows the cold air to continue to flow down the hill, which helps a lot. We are not by any body of water, and that is the reason why we have to plant the cold hardy grapes. And it's also the reason why there's some years if we get a lot of cold weather, our grape harvest is way down because some of the buds will freeze. So it is a risky venture for sure in this area. And it's also why we're the only one in this area, I would say.
Although you all are very close to Lake Ontario, and we get a lot of lake effect snows in this region. So
Yep.
there is some effect from those lake effect snows. So we're
And I would
looking at some bottles. Can you tell us what we're seeing?
Okay, yep, this is Derek's side again, so I'll pass it over to him.
She was scanning over a second ago. Those are some of the spirits we make. Most of them are fruit infused. Like there's an apple pie, ruby red, which is actually a fortified wine. There's a raspberry lemonade, maple, blackberry brandy, and blueberry also.
And we have a great question. They want to know, as you're a winemaker, what do you need to do to learn to be a winemaker?
Oh, that's quite the journey. I guess my interest started when I was younger at home, and a lot of research, a lot of trial and error, a lot of studying. Eventually, and I was a nurse before, and I honestly decided that the whole wine thing was consuming my life. So at that point, I decided to invest fully into it and went to college, got a degree studying enology, viticulture, chemistry, every aspect you can imagine.
And is there a certification that you have to achieve to become a winemaker?
Not necessarily. Honestly, you don't have to. There's no requirement, like state mandated requirement or anything like that. Like a lot of them out there probably knew somebody and got lucky and got a job. But in my case, it helped me get where I am anyway.
And we have Sarah Beth from Arizona, and they have to protect their grapes from heat damage. What do y'all do to protect your grapes from frost damage?
In the past, we've actually laid some grapes down on the ground and covered them with fiberglass blankets. But for the most, we don't want to have to do that. That's very time consuming. So for the most, they're fairly safe here. Because with these cold hardy grapes, they'll survive temperatures up to like -30, a lot of them. Sometimes you get a little colder than that and they don't survive quite as well, but overall I'd say they do a pretty decent job of maintaining through the winter.
Can you take us through the process of how wine is made?
Yes, we just happen to be on the crush pad right here, so I can kind of give you a rough explanation. So pretty much during harvest, when the grapes are being picked by hand, they get brought up here in crates and set down on the ground here. And then I'll have this machine over here, which is called a crusher destemmer. So pretty much I'll weigh the grapes in so I have a accurate account of the tonnage. Then they'll go in this auger will take all your grapes clusters through, and inside there's actually I might be able to, no, I'd have to find that. There's almost like a cage inside that separates the grapes from the stems in there. So all the stems kind of shoot out one side and all your grapes get kind of busted up a little and directed to where I want. So if it's a red wine, I'm going to take all that and send it right to a tank. From there, I'm going to start a fermentation with all the skins and everything in there and let it ferment, and then it'll come out to the press when it's done fermenting. If it's a white wine, I put it through here and then it'll go right over to this contraption over here, which is a pneumatic press we have. Here, I'll turn it on even for you. It'll take 1 second. So inside that, there's a inflatable canvas bladder that slowly inflates and deflates, inflates a little more over the course of several hours. And then all your juice ends up coming out these slots here. It just needs 1 more second on that. It's going slow. Yeah, here we go. So let me put it here. So over time, that'll rotate around like it's doing now. I said all the juice will run out these slots. There's a tray underneath that collects all that juice. And then from there, I pump it to whatever tank I want, and I can do, whatever my desire is with it from there, I guess, essentially.
And from this stage, once you've extracted the juice, where does it go next? Do you have to add anything to it, or do you start fermenting the juice and that's all you need?
So typically, like with a white wine, I'll try to add some enzymes to it and let the juice settle overnight to get a lot of those solids out initially. And then I'll basically transfer that, leave the solids behind, and then start fermenting it. With a red wine, with the skins and everything that I pumped in here, usually I'll add some oak additives, some nutrient to it, other enzymes, and specific ones to retain color and some phenolic components and stuff like that. Then usually then you got to monitor temperature. Usually about a day after, I can start inoculating a fermentation, which is essentially taking, your yeast, adding a little nutrient and water, and slowly adding juice to it, getting it adapted to its new culture it's going to survive in.
And Catherine would like to know, what is the reason that you only use the juice for white wines compared to?
That I only use oh, well, I guess by textbook definition, the difference between a white and a red is fermenting on the skins. That's why you have stuff like white Merlot and white Zinfandel, because they're actually red grapes that they didn't ferment on the skins, which is why they end up pink and not dark red. But a white wine, you don't want all the protein strands and textural components, any tannins, stuff like that in your white wine. They're more delicate of a wine, which is why I also harvest them under different parameters, try to keep them lower in alcohol, essentially, in the end, because you don't want a 15% white wine.
And we're looking at some large fiberglass containers. Can you tell us what we're seeing?
Yeah, that's one of them's rhubarb and one of them's blueberry. Those are actually food grade plastic wine tanks. Yeah, they do the job. I like the stainless ones better, but those are much more affordable, so it's easier to get a handful more of them in here.
And so what do you use the flavorants for?
So the rhubarb is just rhubarb juice that's been fermented. I'm actually waiting on some strawberry flavoring to add into that, which makes our strawberry rhubarb wine. That's really it. But the blueberry, that'll become blueberry wine. Pretty much, that's 100% blueberry juice fermented and turned into wine.
And we're seeing some various stainless steel vats. Can you tell us what happens within those also?
Yeah, so I'll send that juice in, start a fermentation. So typically it'll start off in one tank fermenting, and that process takes roughly 2 weeks. So during that fermentation, you have all sorts of solids settling out to the bottom of that. So when the fermentation ends, you want to rack or transfer it to a new tank, leave those solids behind, get rid of those. Then in the new tank, you're going to add a clarifying agent. I use what's called bentonite. It's a clay polymer with a high ionic charge. So all the oppositely charged ions, protein strands will attract to it and settle out. Just speeds up the process a little. From there, more solids settle out, fall to the bottom. And it's honestly, when you do that, it's a difference between night and day in clarity, but there's still a lot more in there that's gonna come out. So you repeat that process, rack it to a new tank. Then you got to start filtering, which this is the what I filter with here. It's just a plate and frame style. It does pretty good. About 3-4 filters per each wine, I'd say. Then you got to cold stabilize it. There's a lot of on a molecular level, there's a lot of solids that are going to come out of wine over time. So my job is to make sure they don't.
So once filtered, where do we go next? We're looking at some oak barrels.
Yeah, well, mostly Marquette in the oak barrels. I have a couple oddball like St. Croix. That's the one I'm going to use to, I'm going to fortify that. So it'll essentially be a port, except we can't call it port because we're in the US on the label. So, so it's fortified wine. The rest are all Marquette in the barrels. With Marquette, I've learned that's, our dry red wine. So we want that to oak age and mature within those barrels as long as possible.
And we're seeing quite a few oak barrels, and we did see some distilled spirits. Do you do that also on site?
The distilling, yes. Yeah, if you want to show them so our distillery is kind of a nuts and bolts operation still. It's a growing process. And here's the still, and we have some barrels with brandy in them actually aging to eventually be released. Yeah.
So what are some of the spirits that you distill in your distillery?
So pretty much because we're a winery, we have an abundance of wine. So I use wine to make what essentially comes out as vodka. It's grape vodka, but you wouldn't know it because it comes out 190 proof. So at that point, it's pretty stripped of any flavors. So actually I like it better than most other vodkas, to be honest. But from there, I just use that to make whatever spirits we want to make.
Can you briefly just go through the process of distillation?
Yeah. So with the still, it's all based on temperature variables, where water boils at 212, alcohol boils at 172. So if you keep your temperature between those parameters, the steam that comes off the top of that is going to be alcohol vapors primarily. So that comes up, and we have what's called bubble plates in between these. That steam will collect onto and drip back down into on top of the next bubble plate and have to heat up and do the whole process again. And this is, the more it does that, the more times, the more refined alcohol vapors you're going to get, which is how I'm getting 190 proof out of that. So then up top, once it gets past those chambers, these hoses go in up there into what's called a condenser. Essentially, it's cold water circulating through, taking that steam, turning it back to a liquid. So from there, and then it drips down into, well, carboys is what I'm using, honestly.
We have quite a few questions, so I'm gonna go ahead and throw some out at you before we wrap up. Sarah wants to know, what do you do with the leftover grape and fruit pulp?
With the grape and fruit pulp, people have asked about making grappa and stuff like that before, but honestly, our press is so efficient that there's not any juice or sugars really left behind enough to do anything like that with. So it essentially becomes mulch.
Vet wants to know, is there a sulfite difference between European and American wines?
Not an exhibit. So there's probably more strict regulations. I think that varies more so between winery to winery, where you have your organic wines and your mass-produced wines, where mass-produced wines are talking millions of gallons they're fermenting and making. So with those, you're typically going to find a lot higher sulfate level of, your free SO2, which is your sulfate, is probably going to be near 200 parts per million. Whereas me, I'm keeping it around 60 parts per million, which at that level can be in the organic range. I'm able to do that by keeping my pH balance and out of the danger zone, and keeping my titratable acid at a certain level too.
We have quite a few questions about pollination. How y'all manage pollinations? Do you bring off-site pollination or pollinators, or do you have a?
We have some local beekeepers that keep bees on site, and they seem to do a pretty good. They're busy bees.
Amanda Huff would like to know, what would be the best seasonal conditions to harvest red wine grapes in your area and white wine grapes?
Well, Typically, you don't want a ton of rain. Rain, you get too much rain, you're gonna end up with funguses and molds and stuff like that growing in the grapes, and that's not good. So essentially you want a good hot dry summer with as much sunshine as you can get, because one of the problems with up here is we don't get nearly as much sunshine as, say, California, and which means, kind of puts us behind the 8 ball a little bit. So we gotta use different grapes that it can handle a little less. So, but the more sunlight we get, the better every year. And the dry and hot, essentially.
Carol would like to know, how do you protect your crops from the birds?
Bird netting. And last year they came in there hard and were all over everything. But you gotta, essentially, you don't want to put the bird netting on until the bird's already into them, because you have to work on these vines and do things to them, and it's kind of hard to do once you put bird netting on. So it's just essentially nets that go over all the rows and get tied together on the bottom.
And Chandra Davis would like to know, what conditions do you have to start using or thinking about covering your grapes being too cold or too much precipitation?
That's a learning. Well, with cold and like covering them to protect from weather, when we've done that here in the past a few years back, that was a learning experience, because we had a variety that wasn't quite handling how cold they said it could. And as far as like with precipitation, we'll do a lot of canopy management and thin out a lot of leaves, so you're getting more airflow and sunshine coming through. And then there's also certain fungicides and stuff like that we spray to prevent any fungus or molds or anything from growing.
Well, awesome. I think we have a couple more questions that John would probably be able to answer for us.
Okay.
Thank you so much for speaking with us.
All right, I don't know if you asked a question, but I am here.
So Brianna wants to know, and we have a couple of questions left before we wrap up. Do you partner with any local producers to sell cheese or other ag products to pair with the wines?
Yeah, so on the entertainment side of it, I guess is the best word to use. We use cheese from lava producers, which we also have a dairy farm. That's where we market our milk through. So it's kind of a full circle thing. So we use local cheeses on all of our meat and cheese boards. We buy meat and sausage, bologna, stuff like that from a local meat market. That's where all the meats come from. In the store, we sell locally produced maple syrup. A lot of it comes from the trees on site here. And we sell honey from a local guy. There's a coffee roaster around that we sell his products. And then like through the restaurant, we buy as much local in-season fruits and vegetables as we can, which obviously that's very limited around here to a couple months during the year.
Well, awesome. We want to thank you so much for having us at Tug Hill Vineyards. And before anyone goes anywhere, we do have our drawing. So I will share my screen now, and we will be sending you 10 of our lucky participants a basket or some products from Tug Hill Vineyards. So if you can see my screen, if you can give me a thumbs up in the chat, or just say something in chat, trying this for the first time. Awesome. So here we go for our first drawing. We'll go ahead and spin. Hopefully you're seeing it spin on your screen. Awesome. So Mingala is our first winner. Mingala. So our second winner is Chandra Davis. Our third winner is Sarah Beth. Our fourth winner, Chris Lyons. Michaela Kerr. Oh, our very own Jenny Hull from Truxton Academy. Congratulations. Jamie Willard. Jessica Tyson. Linda Law, and our final winner is Brian Akama. Thank you so much for joining us. For our winners, if you want to send me an email, I will put my email within the chat for the best address to ship to you this summer. We hope you all are enjoying the National Ag in the Classroom Conference. And thank you so much, John and Taryn and all your staff from Tug Hill Vineyards. You all have a fabulous summer and take some time off with your family. Thank you now.